Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world are overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, we'll hear from organizers in the movements for social justice, and we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. This week on Rising Up for Justice, I'm joined by Richard Trent. He is Executive Director of Main Street Alliance. He has a long history of fundraising and organizing for progressive causes. Main Street Alliance is a national network of 30,000 small business owners organizing to reclaim economic and political power for local communities. Welcome to the program, Richard.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let me first ask you to explain a little bit more about Main Street Alliance. We often hear politicians tout these words. Well, yes, we are worried about Wall Street, but what about Main Street? And it's become this kind of word or phrase that has referenced mom and pop businesses. How do you describe this alliance to people who've never heard of it?
So small businesses are the thing that make communities worth living in, places worth visiting, and they're unbelievably special and crucial for contributing to the dynamism of our the spaces that we inhabit. But small business owners haven't ever really been organized for economic or political purposes in super intentional ways. I'm saying this with a clear understanding of the fact that the chamber system is quite well known. The issue is that the chamber system really speaks for some of its largest members when it's shaping policy and advocating. But the fact of the matter is 80+% of small businesses in this country are actually really, really small, like surviving on less than $200,000 in revenue. And so that means that there's a different issue set that needs to be addressed when dealing with the vast majority of the small business owners in our country that really contribute to our local economies. So back in 2008, a group of sort of feisty, scrappy small business owners got together and became some of the loudest proponents of single-payer healthcare, but then ultimately the Affordable Care Act. Since then, we've grown into a network of 30,000 small business owners across the country that have fought for policies like paid leave in Minnesota in 2023. We've been in community with labor in ways that you'll never see the chamber or the NFI being. And so we like to think of ourselves as really being that countervailing force against sort of traditional small business voices in the chamber system, just so that folks know that it's not just there are small business owners out there who are really fighting to make their communities stronger, not just fighting to for the sake of their own businesses, right? There's like a rootedness that so many small business owners that I talk to describe in why they started their work in the first place, just being responsive to community need. And those are the folks that should be shaping policy for our local economies.
Right. We often get the impression that small business owners are most interested in, the tax credits or reducing red tape in permitting processes and zoning laws and those nuts and bolts of what it takes to actually open and sustain a small business. But it is so much more than that. And I want to dig into what you were saying around being a proponent of, universal health care, for example. Why would that matter to a small business owner?
So I'm not sure how you feel about this candidate, Graham Plattner, but he actually was on a podcast the other day and said something really, I thought, insightful, which is that the reason that he was able to become a small business owner in Maine was because of his VA insurance, as being a veteran and having most of his healthcare costs essentially being taken care of. He said that provided him with the financial stability that he needed in order to take the risk of starting an enterprise. we think similarly at Main Street Alliance, which is to say that healthcare, childcare, paid leave, those policies historically have been talked about all too often as like a woman's issue, or maybe if we do it, then it's the right thing to do morally, but it's not really going to help businesses. We take a really different approach, which is to say, we see those three things, healthcare, childcare, and paid leave, namely, as essential economic infrastructure, as essential as the roads and bridges that keep so many of our cities and towns together. If you have a sick workforce, you don't have a thriving Main Street economy. If folks aren't able to find affordable and accessible childcare, then they can't show up to work regularly. And if people have to regularly choose between taking care of a sick loved one with cancer or maybe a newborn, between that and collecting a paycheck, you're going to see torpor and economic underperformance at the local level. And so we actually think that in terms of unlocking American productivity and enterprise, one of the smartest things that we could be fighting for is for a fully fleshed out care economy. So, yeah, I think that that's maybe one of the things that makes an organization like Main Street Alliance different than a lot of business advocacy organizations and trade associations. We really fight hard for stronger care economy policies and that stronger safety net. But I don't want to mischaracterize the political predilections of our 30,000 plus members. We have MAGA supporters in our 30,000 plus membership. We have moderates and centrists and liberals and progressives. The thing is, though, that they're all pragmatic, and that their pragmatism has all sort of been channeled in the same direction and ended up at the same place, which is to say, the most pragmatic thing that we can do as small business owners is fight aggressively for these bold care economy policies. So, yeah, this isn't. I don't want to characterize the organization as like just serving progressive or liberal small business owners. We've got everyone in our membership, and I think that's kind of what makes us more powerful than your average business advocacy organization.
You say on your organization's website that Main Street is strong when small business owners, especially Black, Brown, and women entrepreneurs who have too often been excluded, have a real say in the rules that shape our lives. How does Main Street Alliance center racial justice, gender justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think about my own upbringing. I was raised by a small business owner. My mother owned a catering company for the first few years of my life. And I think about how unbelievably hard it was for her to run that business, not just because she didn't, have someone to confide in. She was a single parent household. I lost my father at an early age. And it was because she wasn't plugged into a community of other small business owners in her position, who could share best practices, who could tell her, oh, girl, this worked for me, XYZ. And so I just in coming into this work, I thought about her so much. And I thought about so many of the Black and brown, just hustlers out in this country that just don't don't get a solid opportunity to pursue that enterprise that they've always thought about. And so I think that we're seeing more and more that this enterprising spirit, it really runs through Black and brown communities in ways that are undeniable. And so at Main Street Alliance, we do our best to uplift the voices of Black and brown and women entrepreneurs that have for way too long been cut out of our economic discourse, because they are the real drivers, especially in some of the city centers and suburban centers where we've got sort of bold membership. They are the real drivers of local economic prosperity, and they've done that through so many different sort of systemic barriers that have just been thrown their way. I mean, everything from redlining and not being able to. I can rattle off all the different policies that have held back Black and brown entrepreneurs. We don't need to have this turn into a lecture, but that they've been so resilient and so successful through all of that adversity, I think really speaks to why we should be investing in Black and brown entrepreneurs even more. And so to see, especially under this Trump administration, the underinvestment, the rolling back of so many of the Biden era policies at the Small Business Administration that were squarely focused on women entrepreneurs, on Black and brown entrepreneurs, to see all that stuff being undone is a real slap in the face, and it's a clear indication of uh, the animus, I think, that drives so many of the policymakers under this administration.
Is the centering of things like, pushing for just and publicly supported childcare also part of, say, uplifting gender justice? Because women business owners who have children tend to do the double work at home because, we still live in a patriarchy, unfortunately. So is that also part of it?
I'm the proud father of two children, two boys, and I'm unbelievably grateful for my partner, my wife, who only 6 weeks after giving birth to our first child had to return to the office, which is, in my personal opinion, not nearly enough time for everything that she went through to have to go back to work. Um, she ended up
In
herniating
some
a disc.
countries, people get a year off, both parents,
Right. This is kind of
paid.
normal, and yeah. So she goes back to work 6 weeks after giving birth. A couple days later, she herniates her disc trying to pick up our firstborn. She is essentially incapacitated for 3.5 months. Has to have surgery in order to sort of fix her to fix the herniated disc. We're I mean, this is a small example, and honestly, we're lucky ones because I was able to work remote and there was some flexibility there with our schedule. That so many folks, especially women in this country, have to make the tough decision of, do I continue the, bonding with my child and making sure that my body is okay, or going back into the office? It's cruel. It's cruel that we're forcing people to even make to have to live in that calculus. And I think that you see this in the number of women who have had to drop out of the workforce because of poor access to affordable childcare. We are missing out on a whole generation of talented, enterprising women entrepreneurs, women workers and small business owners, simply because our governments have decided to continue kicking the can down the road when it comes to providing affordable childcare. I think it's really up to organizations like ours, and to other advocacy organizations that are like-minded to fight like hell to make sure that we fix that, so that families don't have to live through this that terrible calculus that I was describing of, do I do I take care of my
Right.
health, do I take care of my family, or do I collect the paycheck?
Right. Oh, I can relate. What are the main strategies that Main Street Alliance uses to achieve your goals? How do you harness those 30,000 individual members who are small business owners around the country to advocate? I imagine there's direct government lobbying, local organizing, all of the above.
Absolutely, all of the above. But I think what we've recognized at the organization in the last few years is that um, so many of us are living lives online and on our phones. And I think that we are being naive if we don't admit the extent to which social media and the 24-hour news cycle are really shaping our understanding of the world. And so we have invested a lot more time and effort into narrative shaping work, into earned media, into paid comms, where it matters, because we understand that um, anchoring Americans in a shared sense of economic reality and fighting disinformation where it rears its ugly head is maybe one of the most important sort of advocacy pushes that an organization like ours can make. Now, we don't think that it ends there, right? Like the media and the narrative shaping piece and the digital. are all really key parts of sort of our modern day distributed organizing approach. But we still very much lean on the organizing prowess of our membership, 30,000 folks across the country, and we invite a lot of our members um, to reach out to other small business owners in their own network and share with them the day of action that they organized around childcare in Wisconsin. And yeah, you should come on down to the next meeting that we're having because we're talking about how a public option is on the table in the next election. Like it starts very simply with kind of like a really dedicated small business owner that kind of gets it and is not afraid to be outspoken about some of these matters. But it really quickly radiates out into a fast growing community of folks who are plugged in into the difficulty of running a business these days, and who are trying to really do something about it where they live. And we see so much that's capable at the local level, right? As our federal government kind of grinds to this halt, and it's harder to get anything through. The states have emerged truly, once again, as the laboratories of democracy, where innovative policies can take root. And in a lot of those states, it's our small business owners that are on the front lines and that are in state houses, meeting with lawmakers, talking about why these policies matter.
I'm wondering how you also use storytelling to call out those politicians who love to talk about small businesses when they are actually selling policies that favor big corporations. We see this time and time again. There's such a sleight of hand that takes place, and I think they think the rest of us and the public doesn't buy it. Maybe we used to buy it, but I think we're seeing through it. How do you call them out? Because it's so often that they talk about tax breaks for businesses and the powering of our economy, but generally those are disproportionately beneficial to massive multi-billion-dollar corporations.
Yeah, we call this in the industry small washing, right? So it's like the big businesses will try to masquerade as small businesses because they realize that there's this like reflexive American attraction to sort of the small business enterprising spirit, and so they try to glom onto that and take advantage of it. I think what's often the case is that um, people have a really warped sense as to what small business owners are actually living through. So 50% of small businesses in this country are operating on about a month of working capital, a month of runway. So if something goes wrong, they've got like a month of cash to make things happen. You've got in our own membership, about 20% of our polled members were on Medicaid. Most people don't think of small business owners as being even capable of qualifying for Medicaid, but you've got a lot of small business owners who are choosing not to take a salary themselves. So on the books, it actually looks like they're making not that much money annually, and so they qualify for Medicaid. Like this is the real story of American small business. It's not always just the massive uh, um, plant, right? That's spitting out widgets, and you've got management, and it's sort of stratified, and that's one image of small business that's been successfully promulgated by a bunch of different bad actors. And I've even seen like folks who I kind of think are smart and sort of respected thinkers. Sort of Paul Krugman characterized small business recently in the Substack post as being kind of a naturally conservative demographic, and Matt Iglesias in a similar, I think, Twitter post talked about small business being the most conservative demographic in America. Not true at all. And it's my point is backed up by not just conversations with thousands and thousands of small business owners across the country, but real research. And 80% of small business owners, according to Small Business Majority, believe the tax code is rigged unfairly to advantage large corporations. When you actually sit down with small business owners and ask them how they feel about these policies, overwhelmingly they support things like taxing the wealthy in order to pay for the public option or universal health care, and universal child care. They see the benefits of paid leave and how it makes them more competitive relative to larger corporations that are able to easily sort of offer a benefit like that. The more you talk to people about these policies and get real, the more they tend to support a lot of these progressive policies that we've been fighting for 17 plus years, or
Let's
actually
talk
going on
about
20 years.
Let's talk about democracy. We are living at a time when we have oligarchs, as Bernie Sanders likes to call them. They're people who control corporations that are so large and so powerful that their revenues and figures rival the GDPs of small nations, and they thrive best when democracy is weakest. And we are seeing the results of that, right? We have slid into the beginnings of a fascist state that really does benefit these big corporations who thrive when there are fewer and fewer regulations and when democracy is weaker and weaker. Where does Main Street Alliance stand on the strengthening of democracy as a way to protect small business owners and also communities that they work in?
Absolutely. So I find myself occasionally in conversations where Democratic insiders or staffers or funders are talking about the affordability crisis in one room, and then in another room they're kind of talking about the Democratic backsliding, threats to democracy. I understand those two things to actually be the same thing, which is to say, too much power has been concentrated in the hands of too few people. And when that happens, you're going to see the proliferation and the concentration of monopoly power.
I'm wondering if you can also get a little bit into the importance of small businesses as part of our social fabric. You can have billionaires like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk complaining about seeing unhoused people on the streets and not connecting it to the inequality that they fuel, and them seeking out, European cities where there are small businesses thriving and where there are regulations to keep big businesses in check, and they don't make those connections. And I'm wondering if you can, just staying on that storytelling aspect for a little bit, explain the importance of boosting small businesses because they make for great livable cities, because they improve the quality of life for everybody.
I think what you've just articulated is how my team should be talking about these issues more often, because it's like super accessible, I think, to folks that maybe aren't tracking these economic issues super closely. Because let's just talk about the country that we want to live in. Is the country that we want to live in, small towns across the country essentially decimated, no job creation, one big box store that is sucking up all the resources and that is the main employer for a languishing town. Restaurants and bars and little antique shops and cafes can't survive because not enough people even want to stick around in the town to patronize those businesses. Because that's the world that we're headed towards if we allow corporate power to continue growing sort of unchecked. Or we could live in a country where small towns, cities are dynamic, where entrepreneurs, especially Black, brown, and women entrepreneurs, have a fair shot at taking something that started as a dream or a desire to be responsive to community need, and actually turning it into an enterprise and serving their community.
And just to interrupt you, Richard, I mean, we're living at a time when immigrants are so demonized, but immigrant-run businesses have such cultural, such culturally interesting aspects and lend our cities so much beautiful flavor that you can't mimic. That too is something I think that's part of what, you see these billionaires enjoying and then being part of the machine that attacks immigrants.
And there's research out of the SBA recently that has just ended the ability of immigrants to actually start new businesses and get loans from the SBA, that immigrants were driving a massive share of new new small business starts, essentially. And so, yeah, immigrants are an unbelievably important sort of entrepreneurship engine in this country. But I mean, the long and short of it is that this country was really, really good for a long time at supporting entrepreneurs and investing in folks that had that dream. And then starting in the late 1970s, post Milton Friedman, as monopoly, as the sort of narrative around corporations sort of became that, oh, bigger is better. It's just about stakeholder, shareholder value. You see from there a decline in new business formation that kind of started to flatten and go back up under Biden, where post-COVID you actually did see a lot of new businesses start up again. But like it's no surprise that the decline in new business formation maps pretty perfectly to the increase of the proliferation of monopolies in this country. And so we've got to be paying attention to this. We've got to be talking in terms of what is the country that we want to live in? What does the town look like that we want to live in terms of its economic dynamism and vibrancy? And yeah, you're totally right that we this is really a visioning exercise, almost more than like a wonkish policy exercise.
Give out a website, Richard, where people can find out more. And also, if a small business owner is listening right now and wants to engage, wants to become part of the Main Street Alliance, how can they do so?
www.mainstreetalliance.org. Go. It's very clear at the top of the page how to sign up to become a member. It is free. Depending on where you are, there's likely some events happening. And we look forward to seeing you in our membership. Into reaching out and hearing your story. And if for those that are interested, also check out our Substack, The Write-Off, on Substack, for kind of like weekly breakdown of the biggest topics in small business news.
We'll post a link to that from our website. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Richard Trent, Executive Director of Main Street Alliance, and this is Rising Up for Justice. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series, exclusive to viewers of Free Speech TV and subscribers of my long-standing program, Rising Up with Sonali. You can find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.